Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome you very warmly to this edition of our panel series on peace and security issues. It's the 16th event that we're doing today as part of our series. As you know, we are covering a very wide range of topics in accordance with the breadth of the peace and security agenda. We have had just a few days ago the important debate in the Security Council. The peace and security agenda, of course, is anchored on the question of displacement. That resulted in a presidential statement and also in a very strong turnout and a very strong interest in that discussion, which we found very encouraging. Because that is indeed a very topical issue. Unfortunately, the issue of violent extremism, that is really our topic this afternoon, is increasingly becoming a bigger and bigger challenge in connection with the increasing security agenda. And this afternoon we will be hearing about the activities of an organization that has been particularly notorious, and that is Boko Haram. There's no need for me to talk about the activities of this organization and sort of detailed review from our panelists. And we are doing this really with a view to giving those a voice and a platform who can give us first information from what is happening on the ground. So I would like to introduce our panel this afternoon. We have two speakers from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. First we have Joy Onyesa from Nigeria, and she will be our first speaker, followed by Sylvie Longmont from Cameroon, and as a commentator we have our colleague from Human Rights Watch, and her name is Lisa Gernhold. Sorry, special welcome to you, and I will hand the floor directly to you. Joy, please.
Good evening, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I'll be discussing the context and impact of Boko Haram in Nigeria, amongst other issues. Boko Haram started in Nigeria actively shortly after the 2011 elections. And it started off as political tensions built up between the various political parties in Nigeria. Shortly after that, we had a transformation of the struggle. It wasn't as extremist as it is now. We saw a gradual transformation of Boko Haram. Shortly after the elections and the conflicts which ensued thereafter, they started waging war against women, girls, and the whole populace of Nigeria. But Boko Haram is more drastic, the effects are more drastic in the northeastern part of Nigeria. And today we've seen a lot of follows of the incidents, the violent extremism that's happened in the northeast. We've had a lot of IDPs within Nigeria, and over 70% of them are women and girls. We've had loss of economic livelihood. We've seen increase in militarization of the northeastern part of Nigeria. But this is not limited to just the northeastern part of Nigeria. We've had spill-off in other parts of Nigeria, because most of the people living in northern Nigeria have migrated down to other parts of Nigeria, the southwest, the southeast, and the south-south. This has also led to communal tensions, because when they move over to these places, they need to have another source of livelihood, they need to have places to stay, and then this has generated a lot of communal clashes in those areas. And we've also seen an increase in the Fulani herdsmen, which some people say would also be called Boko Haram, because they also operate the same way the Boko Haram operates in the northeastern part of Nigeria. And know the one that generated a whole lot of global attention is the abduction of the Chibok girls. In this incident, they abducted over 200 girls from school when they went to write their what we call high school exam, and they took off over 200 girls. Till date, we haven't gotten all of them back. And according to the reports we've had from the government, they're still negotiating with Boko Haram to bring back some of the girls. Those some of the girls were reported to have escaped from the camp. I can't verify the authenticity of that, but that's the report we've had. And what negotiation is still ongoing. And what we are doing as an organization on the ground, and that is Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, is using the WPS agenda to create a change. Currently, as an organization, we are working in over 200 communities in Nigeria. And that includes not just only the northeastern part of Nigeria, we have 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. And with Nigeria has presence in all the 6 geopolitical zones. We're trying to use the WPS agenda to promote women's participation in security discussions. We've also tried to show the link between the global armed trade and the conflict that is happening in Nigeria. Because as a country, we do not produce sophisticated weapons as Boko Haram are using in Nigeria. So definitely the weapons must be coming from somewhere. And so as women activists on the ground, we've tried to show the link between the global arms trade and the conflict that is going on, both in the northeastern part of Nigeria and other communal clashes going on in other regional zones in Nigeria. And that is why as an organization, we are really pushing for the disarmament process. Because this is very, very important if we are to prevent conflict in Nigeria. We are also very happy about the ATT. For us, this is a very concrete link between gender and disarmament. It shows clearly how the global arms trade affects women's rights and affects the participation of women in peace processes. And most of the capacity building we do on the ground is to encourage women and build their capacity to understand some of these regional and international policies and resolutions and how they could engage with it as tools that use them to hold the government accountable and ensure that the processes for ensuring that women's rights are facilitated in Nigeria is in place. We also try to increase women's participation in discussions, not just security discussions, but also in political discussions, because having a space at the decision-making table is very, very critical for the promotion and facilitation of women's rights. So we have a program on the ground which we call Till 2015. Through this program, we promote women's active participation in politics at different levels. And this also increases their awareness on how to mobilize themselves effectively, especially in the northeastern part of Nigeria. Recently, we started very active work in the northeastern part of Nigeria, which is a new thing for us, but it's also very interesting because we've been able to have on-the-ground experiences and on-the-ground information from women in the northeastern part of Nigeria. The impact of Boko Haram can better be imagined. It's just horrific. A whole lot of women are suffering, and there's a whole lot of militarization in the region. A whole lot of IDPs, and a whole lot of other trade that ensued from that, trafficking, a whole lot of sexual violation of women going on, and not much is being said about this aspect of the impact of Boko Haram, which has led to a whole lot of impunity on both sides, both on the side of Boko Haram and on the side of the government as well. And some of the recommendations we are having as women rights activists is that one, the government needs to increase the space for dialogue between itself and CSOs, especially women-focused groups in the country. Recently, we've had 3 regional security summits, one in Nigeria, one in Paris, and one in UK. And there was not even a single women-focused group's voice that was heard in the security discussions. So there is urgent need to expand the definition of security to include the definition of a comprehensive human perspective, which would mean that human rights will be placed at the center of the discussions and which will ensure that women are participatory in all of these discussions. We also hope that the government will be able to implement regional conventions on small and light weapons in Nigeria. And I would also like to commend the Nigerian government for being the first country to ratify the ATT. So we'd also like to see them implement the ATT and have a structured program for implementing the ATT. and work together with the CSOs for this implementation. Last year, we launched our National Action Plan, and our National Action Plan is very commendable in the sense that we are the first country in which the government drove the process of the National Action Plan. It has its own advantages and drawbacks. The advantage is that we don't need to lobby the government for political will to implement, because they have already shown the political will to implement the WILPF agenda in Nigeria. But then the drawback is that the consultative processes won't be as robust if it was driven by the CSOs. So then that means implementation, which is largely what we do in Nigeria today as an organization. We do a lot of implementation, try to localize the national action plans in different communities, creating awareness on the National Action Plan itself and how women can engage with National Action Plans, trying to work with stakeholders in implementing the National Action Plans, not only at the national level, but also at the local level. Because at the local level, you have governance closer to the masses. Another thing I would like to also touch on is the need for the government to protect and prosecute violators of women's rights in Nigeria. Because we have not seen any prosecution going on, both on the part of the military and on the part of Boko Haram, there has been so much impunity. And we all know that if there's no prosecution and if there's no penalty for any crime being committed, then people keep on doing it with impunity. And that's why we see a whole lot of violations going on in the northeastern part of Nigeria. But that is not to say that the women have been silenced. Women, apart from that, have not been silenced. Rather, it has made them to be very creative and innovative in the way they mobilize themselves and in the way they work on the ground, doing what they know how to do best, expanding their space, building their capacity, and trying to bring a change. The picture is not all that gloomy, because from all these experiences, we've been able to build our capacity on the ground. We've been able to build strategic partnerships. It has also created windows of opportunity for us to mobilize. Because I can believe that what happened with the Chibok girl, even though it was very unfortunate, and it's still unfortunate because we've not seen our girls and we've not gotten them back home, but it has already opened up a whole lot of space and discussions for attention to the women's rights movement in Nigeria. And this has brought about a lot of tremendous improvement in the way we organize ourselves. Recently, we started a loose network called the National Women's Peace and Security Network. And this network is comprised of over 30 organizations, women organizations in Nigeria. And this is the first time it's actually happening, having this kind of platform in Nigeria. Having network from all over the country, from all over the geopolitical zones, speaking with one voice and articulating the same agenda, working with the women peace and security agenda. So for us, this is something laudable, even though we have such a gloomy pictures, but things are happening and some positive things are coming out of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charlie, also for flagging some of the work we do here at the UN, for the Arms Trade Treaty, which has been one of the good achievements recently, which will actually enter into force in the first day, in fact.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today, and I'll start by extending my gratitude to the Feminine Mission of the Liechtenstein, and the women and the PeaceWomen program for giving us this wonderful opportunity to share on this very important topic, which is crucial for the development of our continent and the world at large. The first thing I would like to point out is that there are some challenges that we face regarding these Boko Haram issues at national level in Cameroon. The first thing I would like to point out is that Boko Haram in Cameroon is faceless. We don't know who they are. They are hidden people, they are hidden in a different territory, and then they are operating from there at their own pace. And then it's difficult to negotiate with people that we don't see. It's very difficult to advocate. We see them except for their attacks. So that is one of the things. Another challenge that we have in Cameroon is what I can call the culture of denial. You know, for so long, Cameroon has been a country not in open conflict. Now this gives room for people in Cameroon, including stakeholders, to pay little attention to to the suffering of people in affected areas. And they take peace initiative for granted. There is a frequently asked question in Cameroon: who is Boko Haram? People are wondering, is it a Nigerian terrorist sect, or is it an army rebellion in the northern part of the country? The question is still unanswered. Why? Because on Wednesday, recently, on the 15th of October, there was a big attack in a locality called Bom in the Boyo division. And there was a great confusion. Why? Because all the attackers were dressed in military uniform. So that's a confusion. Are they Boko Haram or Cameroonians? So it's not really clear. And there is also a big challenge regarding the big population of Chadian, Central African Republic population, including Nigeria in the country. The list of their mistake is attributed to Boko Haram. So you see, this makes another challenge. And also, there's a lack of information. Only the government and the institution, international organization, have access to the affected areas. CSOs do not have access. Therefore, we have little information to be able to get involved in security responses. I would also like to mention the insufficient resources and lack of anticipation. It's worth noting that most of the Boko Haram attacks happen at night. Why? When His Excellency the President of Cameroon went to the summit in Paris, to the peace summit, from what he said, maybe we are saying that this is one of the reasons. He said this: the forces Boko Haram come at midnight, when our defense forces are not alert. And in order to attack a unit of 15 different people, they come in a group of more than 100, coupled with very sophisticated means. This statement is from the President of the Republic of Cameroon. And the statement, for me, simply means applying the insufficient human and logistic resources of Cameroonian armed forces, as well as the insufficient or inefficiency of our intelligence system. I would also like to mention the insufficient collaboration between the stakeholders in the fight against Boko Haram. Even before the Boko Haram issue came into Cameroon, there used to be a phenomenon called highway robbery. And there were a lot of complicities, including with traditional leaders. So they knew who were the people doing that. They never reported it. This is the same thing that is happening now with Boko Haram. Recently, there was a huge ammunition, lot of ammunition that was seized in the house of a local traditional leader. So that poses a serious problem. And now, people in those affected regions, the far north of Cameroon, which is close to Nigeria, they live in constant fear and suspicion. There are a lot of victims of violence, but they are afraid to report because they are afraid of reprisal. And there's high increase of maternal mortality because there are security restrictions. In that part of Cameroon, the means of transport which is used is motorbike. Now, it's forbidden for them to transport again because everybody, that's a government decision. But some women cannot go to the hospital when they are pregnant. We have reported many cases of women who have died because they were unable to reach the hospital on time. So that is a very, very big problem. I feel personally that there are some aggravating factors for that. One of them is the deteriorating social and economic condition of people. Those terrorists, whether from the Nigerian side or from the Cameroonian side, they are operating in a region where people are really poor, extremely poor. It's easy that when a Boko Haram terrorist comes, he can easily give some money to a youth, and the youth easily give advice or become an accomplice. So this is another a very important thing to take into account. And we also feel that the fight against terrorism requires, beyond military action, a strong civilian action and a strong civilian implication. There was an attack in a place called Kuseri on the 4th and 5th of May. And that attack posed a good question. There was a Boko Haram terrorist who was kept the whole night. And then according to the report, there were only 2 policemen on duty that night. And he was arrested and caught and kept in the security place. The question is, how can we have a police post with only 2 security men in this very dangerous zone? Furthermore, in the border villages closer to Nigeria, many parents and especially mothers do not want to send their children to school anymore. They say they better have their children, their daughters alive instead of having them killed. So that's the situation on the ground. Some of the impacts now in Cameroon on Boko Haram are in Cameroon and even regionally. Now, Cameroon now as a country bears the name of a danger zone because of the escalating violence. Recently, when the whole thing started, a Chinese was killed and 10 of them were kidnapped. Therefore, they were in that region because they were constructing roads. This project just stopped. So, no tourism again, no projects are going on in that area. There's high level of violence against women, including a lot of sexual violence. There are cases of rape on a daily basis. And there's an increased number of IDPs. They fled their village, of course, to have for safer places. And most of these IDPs are women and children. They are resourceless and are more vulnerable. And I can tell you that these IDPs have more less support than the refugees, and it's creating another problem in the zones. They are complaining that they are from Cameroon, and those people who are from different countries are receiving support, and they Cameroonians don't have support, so that's another challenge we have. And there is a strong decline on girls' enrollment at school, as I've just mentioned, and of course, numerous human rights violations in the country. There is illicit circulation of arms. We just had finished a national workshop on the contribution of women in security responses. One woman from the parliament stood up during the conference and pointed the fact that a woman, I gave us a case, a woman was going to the hospital and she took a bike and she was crying because she just lost the child. And she was complaining, and when the bike dropped her, the man removed the gun and said, "You are lucky because you are going to this man that I know very well, I will have killed you." So everybody has arms. We don't know. So there is this illicit and increasing circulation of arms. And that region is reported to be a region of high cholera. So now, due to the fact that people no longer have access to safe drinking water, that cholera issue is also increasing. Now, the money that the terrorists collect through various means, we have payment of ransom. The President of the Republic has paid ransom for many hostages to be released. That money would have been invested in other development sectors, including health and education. It's rather being used to fuel this terrorism. And there is a culture of silence from the victims. They don't want to speak. They are afraid. Even if they are dying, they cannot speak because they don't trust anyone anymore. At the regional level, the situation is deteriorating as time goes on. Of course, the insecurity is both in Cameroon, in Nigeria, as well as in Ghana. I would like to just give 2 or 3 cases of Boko Haram, the way they operate in Cameroon. Number 1, they take hostages, especially foreigners. They burn houses. The first case started on 19th of February, where a French family called the Foudier family was kidnapped. And the president was obliged to pay some ransom for them to be liberated. On the night from the 4th to 5th of April, about 20 kilometers from Marwa, which is the capital city, 2 Italian priests and a Canadian nun were kidnapped by armed men. I would like to mention the recent case just last week. On Thursday, 23rd of October, the commander-in-chief and 2 generals were flying the locality called Protocol, and their helicopter was hit by Boko Haram shots. Unfortunately, they had to go back. On Friday, 24th, members of Boko Haram carried out a raid in a village called Glawi at Protocol. 4 Nigerian refugees were killed, 39 Islamists were killed, and many vehicles were burnt. In the town of Anshide, northern Cameroon, only that Thursday 16, 8 Cameroonian soldiers were killed and nearly 200 Islamists. And these are what is on a daily basis. Now, what we have noticed is that as they are doing this attack, they are mostly targeting women, and girls are paying the high price. In terms of what we can recommend, my first recommendation is that, you know, when you are sick, you have to go to the hospital. And when you go to the hospital, you have to tell the doctor what is really going on wrong. If you don't tell the doctor, well, what's wrong, the doctor will not give you the proper medication. I feel that Cameroon should kind of stop this denial attitude. We have to accept that there is something wrong and look for necessary medication. If you consider the impact of Boko Haram on the country's economy, on girls' education, on women's health, and the increased number of IDPs, we say that there is something seriously wrong, and we have to act quickly. I think also that the Cameroonian government should take concrete and bold steps to implement the entire women and peace and security agenda in all settings. This includes elaborating and implementing a national action plan on 1325, taking into account the 3 pillars and putting high emphasis on the prevention pillar. I also think that to AU and other regional organizations, they need to engage states in recommitting to working toward full implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. As far as what we do in Cameroon as WILPF Cameroon, since our installation in January 2014, we have been able to do our best to contribute in these responses. We do on a regular basis sensitization through capacity building and media campaign. We do also with peace education, especially for women and youth in secondary school. We train women in peace building and active violence because we feel that they need to have this skill. We have started a strong advocacy to have a national action plan implementation. And 2 weeks ago, before I came here, we organized with the support of UN Women, with the support of the Ministry of Gender, with the support of the UNDP and other stakeholders, we organized a national workshop to discuss on the contribution of women in the responses to this phenomenon and to launch the process of drafting the national action plan. I'm very proud today to say that as we are here in New York, a meeting is taking place in Cameroon to finalize the recommendation of that workshop because we were able to launch the process of the drafting of a national action plan for Cameroon. So my call is just the support of all of you here to help us in this process so that by next year, 2015, during the celebration, we embark truly on implementation of that very important document in Cameroon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvie, for talking about the situation in your country that most people, I believe, do not know enough about as well. Thank you very much for your comments. And we will now turn to Lisa, who's our commentator from Human Rights Watch.
Thank you very much, and I join my colleagues in thanking the Mission Liechtenstein for hosting this event. I also thank Sylvie and Joy for the work that you're doing, because you really are on the front lines of the struggle for women's rights in the face of violence extremism. Thank you for that. Human Rights Watch has been documenting the abuses both on the part of Boko Haram and the Nigerian security forces since 2009. We estimate since 2009 about 7,000 civilians have been killed during that conflict. And I think it is important, as Sylvie has so eloquently laid out for us, to recognize that there is an armed conflict going on in northeastern Nigeria, and that civilians are increasingly being targeted by Boko Haram. In 2013, we began to document a change in the strategy and tactics of Boko Haram, and focusing increasingly on the targeting of women and girls. Prior to 2013, many of the targets that Boko Haram focused on were somehow associated with government. So they targeted military outposts, government offices, and so on. But from 2014, there has been a very explicit focus on women and girls. We link that to the announcement of a state of security, state of emergency in 3 northern provinces. We also think that it might be retaliation for the abuses that have been committed by Nigerian security forces against families and wives of those either explicitly linked or suspected to be linked to Boko Haram. It is also clear from our research that Boko Haram, the support that it has, and that is sometimes contested and debated, but it is clear that a range of issues, including widespread poverty, security force abuses, endemic corruption, and also widespread impunity for abuses by security forces, is fueling Boko Haram. This report that we released in London on Monday is the first attempt that we have made to really understand what is happening to women and girls in the context of Boko Haram. While much has been made of the fact that girls and women have been abducted, very little is known about what happens to the women who remain in captivity. And this report attempts to document through the voices of women who escaped, through some women who were still in captivity, and through both eyewitnesses and service providers. The report documents a range of human rights violations. Sexual violence is rife. We documented forced marriage, forced conversion, and forced participation by women and girls in armed conflicts. The report also deals with a range of recommendations. We focus on the Nigerian government as the primary institution responsible both for protecting women and girls and also for making sure that those who are able to flee captivity have access to a comprehensive package of health services. And part of the recommendations that we make are ensuring that hospitals and clinics are able to treat civilian victims, that they're equipped with medical supplies to treat post-rape care, to provide post-rape care in accordance with WHO standards, to ensure that all facilities have the ability to provide post-exposure prophylaxis for HIV exposure, and that staff are trained to deliver comprehensive and confidential long-term and trauma counseling. We also ask them, and we note with concern, the failure to include women at the London and the Paris security meetings, and we ask the Nigerian government to pay much more attention to the implementation of its 1325 action plan. We ask the Nigerian police to conduct interviews with all victims of Boko Haram abductions to aid proper and prompt investigations. The report notes a complete failure on the parts of the Nigerian government to conduct any sort of investigation into the abductions whatsoever. We ask the Nigerian police to take many more steps to create an environment that will allow victims of human rights violations, particularly women and girls who've experienced sexual violence, to be able to come forward and report sexual violence. Sylvie has already talked about some of the barriers that women and girls experience. Sexual violence in Nigeria, as is the case with many places in the world, is stigmatized. Women who report sexual violence risk abandonment by their own families. They risk being ostracized by their communities at precisely a time when they require the most support. And as we have documented in this report, there is very little incentive for them to report, since these crimes are not being investigated, and very few, if any, have received access to any services at all. So we have asked the Nigerian police to pay particular attention to creating the kind of environment that will encourage victims to come forward. We also recommend strongly the training of police to be able to offer specialized and comprehensive services to victims of violence. We make some recommendations to Boko Haram, but I'm not even sure whether it's worth me sharing them with you, since they're really not paying any attention to anything that Human Rights Watch or anyone else is saying. But we do ask them to stop all human rights violations against civilians. We ask them to stop targeting women and girls, to stop the forced marriage and forced conversions, and to stop using women and girls in this armed conflict. We also make a range of recommendations to the international community, and we have particularly encouraged the United Nations, the European Union, the United States and United Kingdom as key donors to the Nigerian government. Firstly, to encourage and support the establishment of a commission of inquiry to investigate abuses by the Nigerian security force. It is critical, if the government is to be successful in dealing with the insurgency, for the security forces to be above reproach. There needs to be a vetting of people, of members of the security forces, to make sure that individuals have not been implicated in serious human rights abuses. And our 2012 report, Spiraling into Violence, documents extensive human rights violations on the part of Nigerian security forces. We ask international donors to encourage and support transparent and accountable investigations into Boko Haram violations. We ask them to help and support the Nigerian government to provide integrated and comprehensive care to victims of human rights violations, including women and girls who've experienced sexual violence. We ask them to ensure that whatever care they are funding and whatever initiatives they are supporting in partnership with the Nigerian government, to make sure that that care and those programs are being delivered in a way that is consistent with international norms and standards. We specifically ask them to make sure that no support is being provided to abusive military. Finally, we ask them to assist in the training and in the support of the Nigerian police force to build their capacity to provide adequate investigations into these violations. We ask the international community to support Nigeria in better implementing the 1325 Action Plan. This report, I think, offers a unique glimpse into the terrible experiences of women and girls who have been abducted by Boko Haram. What struck me in doing this research is the resilience and strength that many of the victims we interviewed demonstrated. Their desire for justice and their concern that other women and girls do not experience the same violations that they did. It is incumbent on the international community to make sure that those pleas don't fall on deaf ears. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving us an overview of the very recent report. You probably know that we had, of course, invited the permanent representative of Nigeria to be with us today. She had confirmed, and very sadly, for a personal reason, she had to cancel her participation here. I don't know if anyone from the Commission is in the room. We would, of course, love to hear from you, in particular, if somebody's here from the Commission of Nigeria. That said, the floor, of course, is open now to all of you for any questions and comments you may have. Please do briefly introduce yourself when you take the floor. Yes, please.
My name is Biko Khan. I'm from Pakistan. Could you give us a sense of who Boko Haram actually is? Is it connected in any way to ISIL, to Taliban, to Is it Al-Qaeda? Is it a, sort of a split thing or something? Or is it all one? What exactly are they saying? Are they wanting in terms of taking over? I mean, like ISIL or whatever it is saying this is what we want, Sharia of their own ilk or whatever. Is it territorial that they want to take over? Just to give me a sense of where and also the connection at a larger scale in terms of the other processes as dangerous as they could.
Thank you. Anyone want to take this? Joy?
Like I said, when Boko Haram started, it started that differences in religious ideologies. They started off as fundamentalists, trying to, what they were asking for Sharia state. But we've seen a transformation for what they're asking of. Personally, I think they are confused as to what they want. Because we've seen videotapes of them, they go on the website, so all the things they don't want to do, they don't want westernization of the northeastern part of Nigeria, but they're using all the facilities and ICTs, which they say is not right. So personally, I think there's solidarity. There's now a global solidarity between Boko Haram in Nigeria, with ISIS, with Al-Qaeda. It's all a mix-up now, because if you see the way they operate in the northeastern part of Nigeria, the way they kill, the way they abduct, the demands they make is very similar to the operations going on with the way ISIS operates and with the way Al-Qaeda operates. Even the sophisticated weaponry they use as well, of course funding must be coming in from somewhere. So there's no doubt that there is external linkages and solidarity between Boko Haram in Nigeria and other violent extremist groups elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Floor is open. Yes, please.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for this informative discussion that we're having, which it really lends to violence against women. And we just was very pleased to see Malala have lived to tell the story and moved now into education, getting the Nobel Prize recently. As the Queen Mother, the Community Day of Harlem, and the Ambassador of Goodwill to Africa, how do we see moving forward of dealing with the young people, education through sport? They have a right to play. But how do we use the means now to educate them for the future as we are constantly battling and looking at what direction we should go in? As you know, member states are the one who will have to continue to guide us as we move through civil society. How do we do that? I thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps we can take a couple of others before we go back to the panel. Yes, please. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, my name is Dieter Lehman. I'm a student at New York University. First, I'd like to thank the panel for coming with us in front of us today, bringing this issue again to light, making sure that the issue of these girls and women are not forgotten. So I think we're all in agreement here that the conflict between Boko Haram and the Nigerian government and other governments in neighboring countries is in fact an armed conflict. Representative Cameroon mentioned earlier the need for cooperation from the African Union, which I think is a good idea. This issue should be handled, if not by the Nigerian government, if not, but by the regional body of Africa. So my question to the panel is, where do you see the United Nations' role in this armed conflict in terms of peacekeeping? To my knowledge, Boko Haram is a prominently Muslim organization in a prominently Christian or Catholic or Christian country, Nigeria. Do you see an inclusion of a peacekeeping operation by the United Nations necessary to prevent this conflict escalating to some sort of religious divide, religious conflict that could lead to a lot of bloodshed? And I thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps one more? Yes. Yes.
Hi, my name is Amel Barani from the LISD Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. I just wanted to ask about the root causes for the conflict in general in the area and how much you see that, what are the grievances that are not being addressed that's fueling this. Also in terms of the resources, you said, I think someone mentioned that, people are being paid to join Boko Haram. And when you look at the big picture, just the funding sources for Boko Haram, is it a monolithic group? Typically you'll find that people would use a certain ideology, but then it's all these grievances that are encouraging people to join for one reason or another, and the whole corruption issue in terms of the response and so on. So if you could just elaborate on that, it would be helpful. And then in terms of the National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, how much is that linked to actual, national, the national budget and resources that are being allocated for women's groups and for civil society groups to be able to do some of this work? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to give all of this to the panel. Of course, on this question in particular would be particularly helpful to hear from the Nigerian government. And just to point out that the Nigerian mission here did its own event on the Boko Haram issue a couple of weeks back with a focus on the question of prevention. And you may have some of the answers to those questions in a readout to that. But that was just a comment on the side. Anyone on the panel who wants to respond? Yes.
Thank you very much. I will start with the last question about the root causes of violence. I think that in our context, the lack of basic, when the population is unable to have access to basic facilities, this the open rooms for all these things. For example, in the case of my countries, people scarcely have access, people from this part of the country have access to health facilities. Recently, there was a case in somebody in the hospital who came, somebody was sick, and until you have the total amount of money in your hand, you will not be taken into account. So that person died with the money in the hand. Yes, he was trying to beg. The father was saying, please, can you take care of my child? I need to look for extra money. But the nurses said, no, we need the entire amount of money. So these people, when you are in this type of situation, you are so vulnerable. Therefore, if you have the possibility of having some money from wherever, you are tempted to have it. So I think this is one of the reasons that make people to be vulnerable. Even with these IDPs, it's the same situation. They have nothing to eat. Women are forced to go into prostitution. So I think it's linked with things like poverty, especially poverty, and then little access to education as well. You know that if people are educated, they will be less tempted to accept deals with Boko Haram. So I think education is also key. And in that part of Cameroon, the northern part of Cameroon, one of the challenges we have is that there was the education rate, literacy rate is low. So most of the programs are directed toward that region before even the Boko Haram issue came into. Now, the program was still to yield the result. Now, Boko Haram has come into it again. So you see that the situation has become very complicated, lack of education, and then poverty. That gives rooms for people to be open to complicity with Boko Haram. And in terms of the peace and security agenda, as far as the case of Cameroon is concerned, the peace agenda is not in our policy documents. It's not considered as a priority. As I told you at the beginning, people always consider, even international, and it's true, we never had open conflict. But the situation is terrible now. during that conference that we had recently, there were women from the 10 regions of Cameroon. And then we were trying to see how can women contribute in this fight. People were saying that no, we really, if war comes in Cameroon, and a woman stood up and started crying. Why was she crying? Because she was saying that we are in the same country. I've lost members from my family, and some people are still saying that there is no problem in Cameroon. So it's not a priority, but the events are forcing the country to make it as a priority. Because all the signs that we are seeing in Cameroon, we had testimonies from many institutions, including UN Women, UNDP, who said that they serve in different countries, and the signs that Cameroon have today are the signs that Mali had before war came to Mali, at the same site that Ivory Coast had before war came into Ivory Coast. So now we have CAR with a big number of refugees. You have Nigeria with Boko Haram. What else do we need in order to make peace as a priority? So it's very important. It's not a priority, but one of our advocacy is to make it become a priority issue in Cameroon, because there's no development without peace. That's not possible. Yeah, I'm not finished.
You're not finished?
Yes,
Sorry.
that was it. And in terms of how do we see the question about the youth education? What we are doing in Cameroon as women's organization, one of our targets, the men, are women. But we also put a lot of emphasis on the youth, because we feel that if the youth are educated, therefore we are going to ensure the sustainable peace. Now, when we look at what is happening in Ghana, people are able to live for 15 years, then within one morning they get up and they fire or they kill their neighbors. No. That's why some of our programs back home are targeted youth. You are trying to teach them moral values, solidarities, tolerance, those small things, in order for them to grow up with having in mind these values. So what is important? The moral values, the solidarity, you are my brother. Even if you don't agree on one aspect or the other, the most important thing is how do we settle our disputes. So these are the things that we are trying to do with the youth. And as far as the connection, the linkages of Boko Haram with the international, I can say that even if you don't have concrete proof, there are indicators that this sect has strong linkages. I will take a case of a village in Cameroon where Boko Haram came one night with 300 vehicles, fully armed. Where are they getting them? Where are they getting the money? Even if you don't know where are their connections, but from the way they are armed, from their numbers, from their ammunition, you can still feel that there are strong connection with the outside community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Like my sister and colleague Sylvia said, the causes of the Boko Haram crisis is multidimensional. Some social, political tensions, and you cannot rule out extra-religious ideologies from it as well. But the root cause of Boko Haram and other extremist groups is the global arms trade. Because if you have conflict only becomes armed and violent when there is use of armed weaponry. So without the trade going on, they won't have access to all these weapons. Where are they getting their weapons from, like she asked? Some people are funding it, and that is why it's very, very critical for us to show the link and draw the linkage between the global arms trade and the ongoing armed conflicts, not only in Nigeria, but in other continents as well. So it's very, very important that we address the root causes of this conflict, which is the global arms trade, the global arms trade. And that is why the ATT, like I said earlier, is very, very important. It's very, very important that we start implementing the ATT, that regional conventions on small and light weapons are implemented in countries, and especially Nigeria as well. Because Sylvia gave us the account of how the follow-up from Boko Haram operations in Nigeria is affecting not just Cameroon but other neighboring countries as well. So it's very, very important that we address the root causes of this conflict. Then we can now start looking at other ways of addressing it. But the most important thing is addressing the root cause, which is the Global Arms Trade Treaty. And don't forget that there's an economy in war conflict. When there is war conflict going on, there's a market. So people are profiting from it as well. And that's why it's very, very important to address this. On the you asked them if what the role of the United Nations would be if it's to send military. I think we got it all wrong in the first instance by using a military approach. So having further military approach will just complicate the issue more than what it is. I think the best thing is for effective dialogue, because when you have dialogue, you create space and opportunities for people to discuss. And when you're having dialogue, that means that the voices of women will be at the table. Women will have space to be on the peace table, to negotiate as well. Because in all these things, in all the situations and solutions we have been doing, the voices of women have been very silent and largely absent. And there has not been anywhere in the continent or in the world where you've had peace accords which have been sustainable without women sitting at the table. So what we need to do is to factor in how to increase the spaces for women voices to be heard at the table, for women to participate, for the realities and the experiences of women to be harnessed and put forward. And not just at the informal level where we do organizing, to create space. Like when I was making my presentation, I said, beyond the informal level, even at the formal decision-making table, women need to be there. And it's so sad to see that sometimes we manipulate or we misrepresent the 25 by thinking that having increased space for women is having more military women involved in peacekeeping. That is not all what 1325 is all about. It's about having women who are agents of peace participate substantively, not just as peacekeepers, but also in the process of peace building, which is very, very critical, in the process of conflict resolution, which is very, very critical as well, and also recognizing the role women play, not just as peacekeepers, but as combatants in the conflict. Because even among the Boko Haram, we have female combatants there. How do they affect the conflict that is going on? How do they change the dynamics of the conflict that is going on? These are all the issues that need to be resolved and discussed. But this can be done through effective dialogue, through having women sit at the table and discuss as well, not excluding women from the table. And then in Nigeria as well, the Federal Ministry of Education is working very closely with CSOs, especially peace-focused CSOs, in including peace education as part of the national education curriculum. That is ongoing, and we're hoping that by the next school session that this will have been fully implemented, because the process is getting concluded. And there was a question as to if the National Action Plan it has funding in the budget. For the Nigerian budget, we don't have specific earmarked fundings for the National Action Plan now. But in the National Action Plan, we have strategies mapped out for resource mobilization. And 3 weeks ago, the lead agency, which is the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, put together the National Task Force and Steering Committee, and they're trying to mobilize funds with all the different institutions and development partners that are supposed to contribute to the basket of funds. So that is where we are. That's the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think my colleagues have said what Human Rights Watch agrees with, that there's no place at this point for peacekeeping force, whether it's an AU or a UN peacekeeping force. But I think the multilateral institutions and the donor countries have a very important role to play. Firstly, in helping the Nigerian government provide a comprehensive approach, making sure that there are transparent investigations, that victims have access to comprehensive services, and also critically in their efforts to make sure that schools are safe. It has been a feature of the Boko Haram tactic to target schools. I think we know that Boko Haram means Western education is bad. So there's a critical need for the Nigerian government to step up its efforts to make sure that schools are safe and children can continue to go to school. For me, I think a particularly tragic part of the Chibok abduction was the fact that these girls had made an explicit choice to go back to school to write their exams, which is what made them vulnerable to abduction. The second role I think that the international community needs to play is that they need to put much more pressure on the Nigerian government. The Nigerian government has the capacity and the resources to do more than it is doing. They need to be investigating abuses by their own security forces. The abuses by Nigerian security forces are fueling support for Boko Haram in many parts of the 3 provinces that are most affected. So the Nigerian government needs to show that it is willing to identify perpetrators, prosecute perpetrators, and send a clear message to perpetrators within a rank that kind of conduct won't be tolerated. The international community is not being as clear as it should be with the Nigerian government that these are key steps that need to be taken and that the international community is willing to support those steps.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say something about the question of the involvement of the United Nations. I think that the role of the United Nations is very key. Key in the sense that 1325, 1820, and all other resolutions are Security Council resolution. I think that the United Nations need to kind of engage the state to recommit to this important engagement that they took. And that makes me to raise an issue because when I look at the different resolutions, I will take 2 for example. The resolution against terrorism and the resolution 1325. When we look at the language, there is something wrong with the language. The resolution against terrorism demand, decide, and so on. For the 1325, it's like it's not strong enough. It's like it's asking the government to kind of do this. There is no strong language as with the resolution on terrorism. So I think that as we are also looking into all these important documents, especially as we are going next year on the 15th anniversary, we need to really pay attention to that. Because if we really put great emphasis, high importance on something, even the language we use is speaking by itself. So if we see the language, the government, they don't feel they have to report to the UN, for example. And I think that the UN should hold the government accountable. If not, what is the use of having a resolution if they cannot account to the United Nations? So I think the role is very key in terms of recommitting the state to this important document and trying to see how, in which way you can see this language that was used and make it more powerful.
Thank you very much. We have a few minutes for the last round of questions. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Nicole Garing. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm a graduate student studying this topic. I was interested to know, maybe from Joy and Sylvie, sort of demographically, who are the women who join the peace movements in your countries? Sort of ethnically, religiously, where do they come from, maybe territorially? And also, why do they join? Is it because they feel like their own identity is being attacked through these activities? Do they feel any benefit, any kind of training? What makes them join women's peace groups?
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody. My name is Rosa Pieno. I'm from Uganda. I work with an organization that works in peace building and conflict resolution, Center for Conflict Resolution. I'm highly impressed, especially by my sisters from Cameroon and Nigeria. Back home, of course, we had almost similar problems in our country for over 2 years. Over 20 years. Not totally wiped out, where also children and especially girls were being abducted. But the fortunate part of that is that at least we knew where these children were being taken. We knew the people who were abducting them. I was saddened by Sylvie's statement that Boko Haram in Cameroon is faceless. And when we talk of negotiations, how do we get to talk to these faceless people, non-existent people? But at the same time, there is also in her presentation where she linked this kind of act to some compliance maybe by local leaders. So maybe there could still be a way of finding how do we go about it. As the women who we know have always been even within the conflicts, they have always been very active. How would the women strategize in such a way that they try to get the face of the Boko Haram? I'm particularly looking at the situation of Cameroon, but of course that will go for the other countries as well. I mean, for any of these, as we look at all the other initiatives, negotiations cannot be ruled out. Is there any way that probably the women groups are working out the way of finding out how to get hold of these people? We try to talk them, maybe links to these people, talk this through these people who are linked to those people.
Thank you very much. One last question, perhaps? Yes, two.
Okay, my name is Madeline Olson. I'm a DPI youth rep from LA Post. And I was wondering, because I was looking at as you were mentioning the tactics, that it's changed from targeting government officials of Boko Haram to more specifically targeting women and girls, and also especially with its sexual violence. And I was wondering if there could be a change of the platform from forming extremist ideology of Islam State to kind of, if there could be other insurgency groups as well.
Thank you very much. And you have a question.
Thank you very much for having this discussion here. My name is Natasha Diemann. I'm a journalist from Denmark, currently studying in New York, and this whole discussion makes me kind of wonder, how's the media's role in this? We're talking about a lot of different institutions, countries, and their role in this, but what do all of you think that the media should do or not do? And is there anything that we could do better? Because it kind of makes me afraid that we're repeating history, because we've seen in the past that the media failed in their coverage of huge and terrible things happening in Africa. So yeah, how do you feel about the role of the media?
Thank you so much. You want to start?
First of all, why do women join peace groups? Women join peace groups from my experience in Nigeria for various reasons. And it's not only before the Boko Haram incidents, we've had women's movement, we've had peace groups. And that is fundamentally because the culture and the society is patriarchal. And women have been trying to join groups to define themselves, to find their identity, and it's like solidarity to push forward their voices and their agenda, creating a space for them to meet. So for various reasons, some is from personal experiences. You find someone that have gone through very terrible personal experiences and will be determined that they want to make a difference. So it's for various reasons, from personal to trying to be social change actors and all that. So for various reasons. And the peace groups are, in fact, they cut across all geopolitical zones. You find some very, very active, especially when you have ongoing conflicts. You have very active social movements. And then with some regions where the conflict is not active, you still have different kinds of peace movement going on. So it comes across various regions in different contexts. But all in all, it's trying to move forward the women's peace and security agenda. It's still the same voices, seeking the same thing, trying to create an enabling environment for women's rights to flourish in the country. And as to the role of the media, I think the role of the media is very, very important. And what we have done as an organization in Nigeria is we've tried to engage the media. We try to give them information because I think responsible and accurate reporting is very important. That somehow the media report, media serves as a tool for information and for orientation too. So if they don't give accurate information, if they don't report responsibly, they create more panic and fear, and that is not good. And for us, especially with the Boko Haram incidents going on, not even with Boko Haram incidents, even with the women's rights movement, sometimes when they give negative reporting, which is, you find out, we had this interaction with the media, whereby we were asking them, every time they say, 15-year-old sexually abused becomes front page, and you read the story, it's not saying anything positive, it's just trying to create very funny images. So why wouldn't it be some other way? Even if you want to create awareness on how wrong it is to do that, but not in the way that you're victimizing the woman the second time again. You know, reporting accurately and looking at it from the victim's perspective, and looking at it from, she's a very strong woman to have gone through that, but you don't have to make it look as if, and that's all the stigmatization and discrimination, it just perpetuates that further and makes it very difficult for her to interact in the society as well. And with the advent of this new age, our IT, social media and all that, I was going through my Facebook page and I saw this video clip of, there's this group of boys that were evaluating a young girl they mentioned the school, the University of Calabar. And they were just posting that all around. And people kept on retweeting or rebutting the message all around, you know. And it came from this online blog, one online blog. I copied down the number, I called them, and first of all I pasted on the page, would you please stop posting this? This is also victimizing this girl. Can you stop doing this? But this is what they want you to do. They want you to keep posting this, and it keeps going viral. And I had to call them and say, why do you, if you see this, I would have expected you to call the police, or you go to Federal Ministry of Women Affairs to report this incident, than posting this online. They're not helping anybody, they're not even helping the young girl. And they took it out. And they took it out and they promised, and this was like a week before I came here, they took it down and they said they were going to follow it up. And when I get back, I'll follow up with them on that. That is what we expect reporters and journalists to do, not to perpetuate the circle of discrimination and violence against women. Thank you. I don't know if I answered all the questions that we have.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I will start by the question, why do women join the peace movement? I think the reasons are many, and most of the time, the women have difficult experiences, and then they feel that as a group, they need to share and learn from others, and learn good practices. That is one of the reasons. And some of them really feel that they need to contribute for a better, for the development of their country. So they come in order to really give their own input in the whole construction of peace. And it's true that some of them come truly in despair when they have a very difficult situation they are living and they want to receive advice. After the advice that they receive, they most of the time join the movement. And others, at the case of Cameroon, I think one of the reasons that women join is that they have seen throughout. If I want to take an example of one organization I'm a member of, after our visit in 2007 in Burundi, we came back and we were very shocked. That was the first time, because we never knew people were suffering like that. So when we saw what was going on in Burundi, we said, no, we better take the bull by the horn. Do we need to see our country in this type of situation? So we said, no, we need to prevent, because we think that prevention is better than cure. These are some of the reasons that why women join the peace movement. Of course, peace is the key element for any development. So therefore, we need to, all of us, join the peace movement. According to the role of the media, I think the role of the media is extremely key. But the contexts are very different. In the case of Cameroon, I would like to say that I would ask for more involvement of the media. Like now, for example, I would have loved the media to as we are sensitizing for 1325 National Action Plan, I would like the media to come and help the civil society to bring out these issues. But instead, there is this issue of corruption. If you invite the media to an important event, unless you give them some money, they will not come. Again, they will not come. They will rather be talking about football and some of these things. They are very important as well. But I mean that they don't put high priority on this very important issue. So I want to say that the media should also own this agenda. That's it. They should own it. They should not consider it as women's issue or other people's issue. It should be their own issue. So it's very important. And there was a question on how do we go about it from my student from Uganda. I think we need, as women's organization, as human rights organization, to reinforce collaboration, to be stronger. I think that's very key, because we need to advocate for national action plan, but most importantly for the implementation part of it. And it's not possible to do that as an organization. We need to create network, we need to create stronger partnership in order to bring out the agenda. And of course, it's important to put emphasis on capacity building to enable women to be true agent of change.
I'm going to try and answer your question about the abductions and then also just add another comment on the media. The targeting of women has to be seen in the context of a dramatic increase in both the pace and intensity of attacks against civilians from about mid-2013. Part of that is linked to the declaration of the state of emergency, but part of that has also been linked to a very heavy-handed approach by the Nigerian security forces against suspected Boko Haram supporters or members of Boko Haram. And I want to refer to two instances that I think really illustrate this. One was in 2009, where in Maiduguri, police and soldiers conducted a raid and then executed scores of detainees, including the then head of Boko Haram, Mohammed Yusuf, who was actually executed at the police headquarters in Maiduguri. No one has ever been held accountable for those extrajudicial killings, and they have been a source of propaganda for Boko Haram since they happened. And then in April 2013, security forces carried out a massive raid in Baha, Borneo State. And this followed a Boko Haram attack on a military installation. So security forces rounded up hundreds and hundreds of people. They separated men and boys who were seen to be supporters of Boko Haram, and they were detained for lengthy periods in extremely inhumane conditions. Many died of dehydration, of malnutrition, of illnesses. Many were tortured and physically abused over a long period of time. Hundreds have forcibly been disappeared by the Nigerian government. And again, there has been no accountability for these abuses by the Nigerian government, and these really have fueled the attacks against civilians, which then, as I said, really picked up in pace and intensity after 2013. The point that I want to make is that women and girls are not the only civilians that are being targeted. Boko Haram has targeted churches and Christians. There have been a number of YouTube messages by Boko Haram leaders against Christians, and Boko Haram has burnt scores of churches. They have also specifically targeted Muslims who don't agree with them. The other group that has been targeted, I think that is, and this is a more well-known aspect, is the targeting of students. A part of the story that has not been documented, and here's a story for the media, is that while the girls and the women and girls are being abducted, the boys are being murdered. There was an incident in February 2014 where 59 male students were murdered and girls from the school were abducted. So the targeting of women and girls has to be seen within a broader context of increased targeting of civilians overall. So I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that, because I think if we do, we're not going to be able to look firstly at prevention, we're not going to be able to respond appropriately. I agree with everything that Sylvie and Joy have said about the media. It has a critical role. For me, I think what I find most troubling is kind of the 24/7 news cycle that seeks out the most sensational stories. It's ISIS, ISIS, ISIS right now. There's very little coverage of what's going on in the Central African Republic. The Boko Haram stories only make the news when they're particularly sensational. And we hear very little about the Syrian conflict. That's still going on. So I think what I would like to see is a much deeper commitment on the part of the media to covering these stories on an ongoing basis, because we know that often it is media attention that persuades policymakers to act. And when media attention switches elsewhere, we often let those who need to act off the hook. So perhaps you can lead a movement to make sure that we don't do that, and that the media is a partner in that advocacy.
Sure.
I've been studying some of the lack of coverage in Central Africa for the media side of it, and I think one of the conclusions was that we need more information about it, because the media tells about what people want to hear. because it's a business, right? And a lot of people don't know they don't know enough about Africa and the things going on there. So could it be a lack of like, yeah, I don't know, if a thing like this could help, like having more of that, or I just can't like figure out what went wrong, because everyone knows that this is horrible and you need to tell people about it and have more stories about it, but it's kind of, there's something missing, and I assume that I think it's more information.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, with regard to the Central African Republic, Human Rights Watch is one of the groups, because there are others there. Amnesty International is there. There are a range of humanitarian groups who are there. We have pushed out, we've probably killed a rainforest with all the material that we have pushed out, and we've been pushing it out in this form, but we've been pushing it out on social media, like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. You know, I don't think it's a lack of media. I don't think it's a lack of information, because the information is there. I think it is deliberate choices about what's important. I will, at the risk of being very controversial, I will point to the Ebola crisis, and I will ask you what value is placed on African lives, and I am from South Africa, so I put myself on that side of the coin, versus what value is placed when Ebola comes to the West. You know, I'm amused at getting emails from my son's school that tell me how to protect him, and he's in school in Brooklyn from Ebola. I should just say he's in this country. And yet thousands and thousands of Africans are at real risk of Ebola, and the media is covering the case by case, minute by minute of the two people. You know, my daughter told me, and I think it's true, that more people have been married to Kim Kardashian than have died of Ebola in America. So, but yet there's up to the minute reporting on the two cases here, and we have forgotten what's happening in Liberia and in Guinea, and we have forgotten the conflicts on the continent. So I think it's choices more than a lack of information, frankly.
All right. Well, thank you for a very interesting set of panels. Thank you all for coming. A very special thanks to our panelists. Give a round of applause for that.